All right, today we're going to tackle one of the most influential and honestly, one of the most controversial books to ever come out of Silicon Valley, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. Now, this isn't just a book, it's a playbook for how to build the future. And man, does it start with a bombshell by tearing down one of the most sacred ideas we have about business. So Thiel kicks things off with this one killer question. He literally asks this in every single job interview. And you have to wonder, why? Well, it's pretty simple, really. The answer tells him if you can actually think for yourself. He argues that finding a good answer to this question is the real key to creating something truly new, to making that leap from 0 to 1. So what's the most important contrarian truth at the heart of this whole book? It's that pretty much everything we think we know about business, well, it's built on a complete myth. And that myth is competition. I mean, think about it. From the very first Econ 101 class you ever took, what did they drill into your head? Competition is good, right? It's the engine of capitalism. It drives prices down, pushes quality up. It's just how things are supposed to be. But Thiel comes along and says, nope, that's not just wrong. It's actually incredibly destructive. Okay, let's look at a real-world example to see what he means. Check out these numbers from 2012. You've got the entire U.S. airline industry making a whopping $160 billion in revenue. Huge, right? But because they are all fighting each other in this insane competitive bloodbath, you know how much profit they made per passenger? 37 cents. That's it. Now look at Google. Less revenue, way less, but their profit margin, 21%. So what's the lesson here? It's that creating value for people is not enough. You have to be able to capture some of that value. And in a competitive market like the airlines, you just can't. Google, on the other hand, they're not really competing, so they absolutely can. And this really gets to the core of Thiel's whole argument. Capitalism and competition are opposites. Think about that for a second. It's wild, right? But his logic is pretty clear. If you're stuck in a brutal dogfight with a bunch of other companies all selling basically the same thing, where are your profits going to go? Straight down, to 0. Real capitalism, he says, is about building up capital, which means you need profits. So the real goal isn't to win the competition. The goal is to escape it entirely. Okay, so if competition is so bad, why is everyone so obsessed with it? Well, Thiel points his finger at one specific event, the dot-com crash of the late 90s. He says the trauma from that bubble bursting created this sort of collective PTSD for the whole tech world. And out of that fear came a new set of rules for startups. Rules that, he argues, taught us all the completely wrong lessons. Yeah, this post-dot-com dogma took over. The new thinking was play it safe, make small, incremental advances, stay lean and flexible, which, by the way, Thiel says is just code for having no plan at all. And the big ones were improve on what your competitors are doing and just focus on product. But Thiel's truths, they're the polar opposite. He's saying no, risk being bold, and a bad plan is better than no plan. And the big ones again, competitive markets are profit killers. And hey, guess what? Sales is just as important as your product. A huge shift in thinking. All right, so if competing is off the table, what is the goal? Well, this is it. This is the heart of the book. It's all about going from 0 to 1. So Thiel breaks down progress into two different types. First, you've got what he calls horizontal progress. That's going from 1 to N. Basically, it's just copying stuff that already works. Taking a successful idea and just making more of it. The best word for this? Globalization. But then there's vertical progress. That's going from 0 to 1. This is about creating something brand new, something that's never existed before. And the word for that is technology. And this visual really makes it click, right? The 1 to N path is just spreading what we already know. It's predictable. The 0 to 1 path, that's a leap into the unknown. And for Thiel, this is everything. The future isn't going to be defined by just copying the same old things over and over again. It's going to be defined by technology, by these 0 to 1 breakthroughs. So this is the big reveal. The true goal of any startup, according to Thiel, is to create a monopoly. Now hold on, I know what you're thinking. Monopoly sounds bad, right? Like some evil corporation crushing everyone. But he's not talking about that. He's talking about a creative monopoly. This is a company that's so good at what it does that it creates a whole new category. A company so unique that it literally has no close substitutes. Like what Google did with search? Before them, it was a mess. After them, it was good. Okay, so we get it. Build a monopoly, but how? How do you actually do that? Well, Thiel gives us a blueprint. He says there are 4 key things you need to look for. So, a really durable monopoly usually has at least one of these, but ideally a few. First up, you need proprietary technology, something that is just flat out hard for anyone else to copy. Think about Google's search algorithm, right? Second, you've got network effects. This is when your product actually gets better the more people use it. Classic example, Facebook. Then there's economies of scale. The business just gets stronger and more efficient the bigger it gets. Amazon's massive logistics network is a perfect example. And last but not least, branding. A brand that's so powerful it's practically a religion. And of course, we're talking about Apple. But when we talk about that first one, proprietary technology, there's a really specific rule of thumb he has. It's a magic number, really, and that number is 10. What he means is your product can't just be a little bit better. It has to be at least 10 times better than whatever its closest substitute is. Now, why 10x? Because if you're only, say, 20% better, nobody's gonna bother switching. It's too much of a hassle. But if you're 10 times better, oh yeah, they'll switch. He uses his own company, PayPal, as an example. It wasn't just a slightly better way to pay on eBay. Compared to writing and mailing a paper check, it was a 10x improvement. It was a no-brainer. And that 10x leap is how you escape that crowded, competitive marketplace. A big part of the problem here is that we just don't see the market clearly. We're taught to see it as this kind of smooth spectrum, where every company's kind of in the middle, a little bit competitive, a little bit monopolistic. But that view is totally wrong. And it's a story that companies are actually happy for you to believe. The reality is much more stark. It's more black and white. Most businesses are either way over here, in a fight-to-the-death competitive jungle, or they're way over here, as a monopoly. That middle ground we all imagine, it's practically empty. And the reason we get this so wrong is because companies on both sides have a huge incentive to lie about where they are. Okay, so first you have the monopolists' lie. To keep regulators off their back, monopolies will do everything they can to look small. They define their market in the biggest way possible. So Google will never say, we have a monopoly on search. No way. Instead, they'll say, oh, we're just a tiny little piece of the massive global advertising market. Or, in the grand scheme of the entire tech industry, we're just one player among many. See what they're doing? They're trying to look like a small fish in a giant ocean. But then you have the opposite lie from the companies that are stuck in fierce competition. What do? They define their market as narrowly as possible to make themselves sound special and unique. They're not just a restaurant in Palo Alto. No. They're the only restaurant serving authentic British cuisine in Palo Alto. And Thiel says this is a really dangerous trap because you're lying to yourself. You're ignoring all your real competitors, which is every other restaurant in town. So what's the thread that ties all this together? Escaping competition, building a monopoly, learning to see past the lies? It all comes back to where we started. It comes back to that very first question, and your ability to simply think for yourself. And Thiel has this great line, it's a riff on Tolstoy, that just sums it all up perfectly. He says, all happy companies are different. Why? Because each one found a unique problem to solve, and by doing so, they earned a monopoly. But all the failed companies, they're all the same. They all failed for the exact same reason. They couldn't escape competition. And so we're left with the ultimate challenge, the business version of that contrarian question from the beginning. The real question isn't about what's already out there. It's about what isn't, what's missing. Because finding the answer to that question, well, that's how you find your path from 0 to 1. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What valuable company is nobody building?